Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at today's interactive event. My name is Kurt Nola, Director of Member Relations here at Barnabas Foundation. And joining me today is our Executive Director, Mr. Jim Bakke. Thanks for coming on board today, Jim.
Morning.
Today's topic is healthy conversations, sharing what's in your will with your family. We want today's session to be an interactive event. We want you to be able to ask questions, and so feel free throughout the broadcast today to type any questions in the Q&A section or the little button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. They'll come up on our monitor here, and we'll address those questions as we're able to. And the session is also recorded. And so you'll be able to find a recording of this at barnabasfoundation.com/interactive or by just, I'm sorry, not .com, but .org. To barnabasfoundation.org/interactive. There's also an interactive button on our homepage at the top navigation panel that you can click on to get to. The recording of today's broadcast should be posted by Monday. So if you have someone else in your family or friends that you'd like to share today's topic with, feel free to do so. So Jim, today's topic, having these healthy conversations, sharing what's in your will with your family, we talk about this idea of having a family meeting. So what is a family meeting and why is it so important?
Well, a family meeting is when you get together to talk about the important aspects of your estate plan and your entire life. And this is really important because for many generations, this was just unheard of. This is an untouchable topic for many people. In fact, it's so untouchable that sometimes spouses don't even want to talk about this to each other. And this silence is actually sometimes intentional. I've heard people say things like, I don't want my kids trying to get rid of me for the money. If they know how much I'm worth and how much they're going to get, they're just going to be waiting for me to die. And other people just find it really difficult to talk about. And so they'll just put it off, and so they'll say things like, it just doesn't matter. I won't be around. I'll be gone. I'll just let the kids decide how they want to handle things. That's going to be their responsibility. And since I'm not around, I don't care. Unfortunately, this attitude is actually an invitation for chaos. On the other hand, a meeting where you get the family together and talk about what you're planning, what your values have been, really paves the way for healthy dialogue with your children, and it provides an opportunity to unite the family versus creating divisions, and actually might be an opportunity to reconcile some past family rifts or struggles. And then it also really helps us manage the expectations of the children and avoid what I like to call the expectation gap. Mm-hmm. That gap is that gap between what people expect and what is actually going to happen. Now, if they're expecting this much and they get this much, well, they're happy. It may not be good because we see what happens when people get a windfall they're not expecting. But if they're expecting this and they get this, that's where the real trouble comes. And the farther the distance between what the expectation is and what reality will be, that distance is what causes the chaos and strife and family trouble. And so we don't want your family to be one of those families that after the passing of both parents, the family devolves into chaos and struggle and strife.
Excellent, Jim. I imagine that this is a meeting that is not one that you're just going to have on a whim when some people are sitting down at dinner time. Sometimes there's really some preparations and considerations you need to go into to prepare for this meeting.
Absolutely. And so let's just talk about some of those things. First of all, you need to just decide what is the time and the place where you're going to have this meeting. You want it to be a time where the family can be together, where you can be in a relaxed atmosphere, where there's not a bunch of other stress happening, but you can get the family together, have some fun together, and then have this conversation. And then you need to decide who is going to be in that meeting. Some people will say, listen, I want all of our children, all of our in-laws, even the grandkids, I want everybody there because we're going to talk about everything in the family. Other people will say, having the grandkids and the in-laws in that meeting would not be productive and actually create potential for some difficult conversations. So we're just going to have the children. And in some cases, people say, I want to have the family meeting, but it's actually going to be a series of meetings. I'm going to have a family meeting with each of our kids individually, but we're going to speak about this openly, and we have the same agenda. So first of all, time, place. Some people will set up as a part of a large family vacation, and then they'll say, in our vacation, we're going to have a day where we're going to talk about our planning. Other people will pull everybody together at a special spot. I remember one family I assisted with, they got a place in Florida. Everybody got together, got in a big circle, and they started the meeting, and the father was a former CEO, so he treated it like a CEO or a corporate board meeting. And I was just one of the people that participated in the charitable side of their plans. But that was fun. Other times it was just been in a circle in a living room. But whatever the case is, you want to have a relaxed setting. And then you have to make sure that what you say matches how you say it. So often people don't remember what you say. They remember the tone and the atmosphere in which it was said. And so while we want to be thinking about what are we saying, we also want to be thinking seriously about how are we going to say this? How are we going to say it in a way that makes your loved ones feel loved and feel valued as a result of the conversation. And then you have to decide, how many of these details do you actually want to share? And in sharing the details, you might actually want somebody in that meeting, a third party, maybe your financial advisor, your attorney, or some other professional that can help talk through some of the details, especially if those aren't your forte. I've had the privilege of being a part of a number of these family meetings, and I've been able to, in one case, I basically walked through the entire plan after they'd had a lot of conversation about their family values. But in any case, you might want to consider whether you want to add another professional in the conversation.
It's a lot of things to consider as you're thinking about putting this together.
Yeah.
And both the time and place, as well as who's going to be a part of it and how much details to share. Incredible amount of effort needs to go into doing this and doing it well.
Yes.
Right. As you said, it's just as important as how you say the things as what you say. And so being well prepared is going to help you say that correctly and convey what you're trying to convey to your family members.
Yeah.
So the conversation itself, how do you get things started? This isn't like, hey, well, how was your weekend? This is a lot more detailed than that.
Yes. And I really recommend you put some of this in writing. We have one of our clients that does a really good job of it. They've written a letter with detailing a lot about their family, all of the things they want to share in that family meeting. They've written it in a letter. They update it annually or regularly and share it with their family. This isn't a single meeting for this family. They do this regularly to update what they're doing. And so put it in, get some of the things in writing and put it into a letter. And I think you want to start with your faith and values. What was important to you as a family? Why is faith important to you? You might want to cover some financial principles that guided you. And that might be really good, and it might be some bad financial principles that guided you. And some key milestones in your life, in your lives. I remember one couple that were preparing, and they were just talking about how God blessed them in ways where they felt like they were on the edge of bankruptcy, and somehow God intervened and opened up a new door for them. And those stories need to be told. And I hope that you actually not only tell them, but you actually put them in writing too for future generations. Some of the mistakes you've made. Sometimes a family meeting is a good time to own up to some of those mistakes, and then how God has worked in your lives in the past. Then you shift to the future, and I encourage you to talk about your love for and your aspirations for your children. What do you want to see happen in this next generation and the generation following for your children and your grandchildren and future generations? I've heard just in the last month some amazing stories of people who talked about their grandparents and their great grandparents and the things that they put forward to their family and the legacy that they've had, and then their desire to further that legacy of following Christ and making a difference for the kingdom in their kids and grandchildren's lives. Yeah, so I guess those are probably some of the elements that need to be
Yep.
put in there.
Just a reminder for everybody watching currently, if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A section there in Zoom. It'll come up on our screen and we'll go ahead and take those questions. And just a reminder, I know there's been a number of people that have joined since we first started. This session is being recorded, and a recording of it will be available on our website here in a couple of days, and I'll address that at the end of our broadcast as well. One thing that came to mind as you were talking about this, Jim, I was thinking, and is a family meeting just for people of certain wealth, or is it really applicable to really almost any family?
Oh, I think it's applicable to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I think uh, obviously the more wealth, the more potential there is for that huge expectation gap. And if that gap is going to be substantial, you want to get out ahead of it
Mhm.
and manage those expectations. But no matter what it is, this aspiration for where our kids go is important, probably more important spiritually and relationally than it is financially. We oftentimes get so focused on the financial side, we forget about the relational and spiritual sides of it. And I think that needs to be an important part of the family meeting as
Right,
well.
right. It's not just the distribution part, which is really my next question for you is, how do you talk about the distribution part of your plan, especially sometimes there's differences to how you're taking care of your heirs and so forth.
Yeah, this is that spot where the shoe really starts to pinch because money is this volatile topic and everybody's wondering what's going to happen and how much am I going to get and how much am I not going to get, and some people share everything. I'm going to show you an example here, and you'll see some people will share everything. Other people will share just general principles in form of percentages. But you'll want to share, what are you expecting to give to each of the children? And in grandchildren, if you're going to give them something, maybe other loved ones who are going to be the beneficiaries of your estate. And then how much how much of your estate will they receive? If you decide to bear all of the finances, just realize that now they're going to know a number.
Mhm.
And if you share this, I think it's really important for you to say, this is our plan. This is a snapshot of our plan today. We have the right, and we may change that plan. And of course, our assets may shift. We may give more, we may invest and it may grow, or we may have financial challenges that may shrink it. So it's important for them to know this isn't the exact number, but this is the plan. And then what the timing of the distributions look like. I just remembered a family, a very sad story of a family where after the death of the surviving parent, two of the sisters who were quite, we'll call them spendthrifts, decided the estate is coming to us. Our parents were wealthy. We're taking off for Australia. Right after the funeral, they took off on an extended trip to Australia and they spent like crazy. Unfortunately, they came home to find out that mom had changed her estate plan and limited what they were going to get and put it in a trust where they couldn't get access to the principal. And obviously, very disappointed. No money to pay for all the credit card bills that they'd rung up. And as you might expect, a legal battle ensued. And it was a heavy legal battle. They lost. Very sad situation. But that could have been eliminated if they had had a family meeting and said, hey, listen, because of the way that you're spending money, we're going to give you something, but it's not going to be outright cash. Hard conversation, but probably better to have before than after death. You'll want to talk about if you're designating something for your charitable causes, ministries that are close to your heart, you'll want to inform them of how that's designated. Some people set up funds where children can make distributions to the ministries that are close to their heart. If you're going to set something like that up, you'll want to tell them how that works and how they can be involved. Which ministries have been included in your plans and why. Mm-hmm. And maybe if you've changed your plans, why you've changed them. And I really believe that once you've had a family meeting, that won't be your last one. You'll want to update that as your plan evolves and as your plans change. But you'll want to be talking, when you start talking about your ministries and why, you're again reinforcing your values and your governing principles.
Excellent. So before we can continue with what we had planned on talking about, we have a bunch of questions that have popped in. And so
Okay.
the first one is, what are the top 3 pitfalls to avoid in a family meeting?
Well, I'm not sure I can give you the top 3, but obviously, one of the pitfalls that can happen in a family meeting is that you communicate the right things, but you communicate them the wrong way. This isn't a time to correct your children. This isn't a time to discipline or to rebuke your children. This is a time to express love and aspiration and your plans, but you don't want your kids to walk out of there feeling dejected because you've abandoned them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to get you don't want to. You may have emotions coming out of the conversation, but you want to control your emotions. And if you're concerned about the control of the emotions, that's where it might be good to have a third party that can be a mediator and calm some of that down, because you don't want it to blow up because of expectations. And that is one of the reasons why some people decide not to do a full family meeting with all the children or all the children and in-laws. So you want to control that if you can.
Yeah.
Well,
as you talked, Jim,
the
other pitfalls that came to mind after I read the question was not being prepared, right? We talked early on. Make sure you get yourself prepared to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Both from your own mindset, thinking about your values that you want to convey to your children, the spiritual impact that giving has had in your life, your relationship with the Lord, and all those things. So you have to be in a really good spot to be able to have this meeting. And
yeah. And I would say you might want to practice with your spouse or one of your kids just to make sure that what you're saying comes across like you want it to.
Sure.
I have a lovely wife who really helps me a lot. And when I'm thinking about a stressful conversation, we practice. And she'll say, Jim, that's not the way you want to say it. I'll say to her, Teresa, maybe we won't say it quite that way. But
very good. Yeah. I think your point too about knowing who's appropriate to have at the meeting, especially if you have situations with certain children. Do you have spouses? Do you not? Do you do your meetings individually versus with all your children together, especially if there's tough situations with certain children and you're treating them differently in your will or something like that?
Yeah, I think if you have a child, for instance, where you have to have a significantly different distribution plan than all the other children, that probably is one of those situations where you don't have everybody in the room.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear that in front of everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, Tracy, I see your question here. I just want to call it out. We'll reach out to you directly because your particular question is going to be unique to your situation, and may require some further details. We can't say for sure if a trust makes the most sense for your situation, but we'll reach out and see if there's a good time for us to chat with you.
But I do think that's what's worth talking about. Okay. One of the things that often people wonder about is, what should we do with the family vacation property? Lakeside cabin or condo in Florida or whatever. And there are a variety of ways people handle this. Some people set it up in pretty elaborate LLC or trust structure, and have found that in some cases that's worked well, in some cases it's worked really poorly. But you want to be thinking about the pitfalls of that property being held for the second, third generation. And there are some families that have a property like that that's been a great blessing for multiple generations. But you got to really think through that. I think there's actually a couple of books that have been written on that. We'd be happy to refer those to you.
Excellent. So Tracy, we'll reach out to you on that question. Jim, what invitations for children's input are appropriate?
The question is, are we wanting them to speak into what our plan is, or are we wanting to tell them? And I think a lot of that depends on your family dynamics, but I see that there are a lot of people who will put a tentative plan in place, and they'll go to one or two of their most trusted children and say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. What are your thoughts? What do you think the rest of the family is going to think about this? And are we crazy or not? And I think that that's probably a good idea. I think it's very important that you make sure your plan reflects your values and your principles and what you want to see accomplished with the resources God's entrusted to you. Let me just pause and repeat that. All of us, what we have is really God's, that he's entrusted to us, even entrusting to us the ability to produce wealth. And if we view it that way, the question is, what should we do with these resources God's entrusted to us as we no longer need them, we transfer them to the next stewards. And when we think about these being God's assets transferring to the next steward, I think it's important that we get good counsel from other godly people, maybe our children, maybe others, to help us determine, so what is the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And so I think it's good to get input from your children. But I don't know that the family meeting is the time to say, all right, let's work on our plan. We don't know what to do. You all, let's come up with a plan.
Right.
Now, there might be a family where that really works, but I think that would probably be the exception.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jim, another question here comes to from us, an anonymous individual at the moment, that they have a child that's kind of pulled away from the family.
Yeah.
And do you still leave them in the plan? Do you reallocate those resources? And I remember you had a tough conversation with a couple about this a while back. And you kind of, the question I remember you saying to them was, is that the last message you want to leave to that child? So, what was your thoughts would be a recommendation to someone wrestling with that?
This is such a sad and difficult issue. And many, many, many families, if this is your situation, there's a lot of families that find themselves with one or more kids that have just kind of completely abandoned the family values. Maybe they've got captured in a chemical dependency, or they've really lost their faith or whatever, but they're putting money in their hands would be really not in alignment with your values and your faith. And you're deciding, some people say, I'm cutting that child out of our plan completely. And I don't want to presume to know what you should do with your estate, but I do want to ask you this. Is that statement the last one you want to make to that child as you leave this earth? And it might be that they already know it and you've communicated beforehand, and that is the reality. But I also want to ask you, is this a time where you might want to give room for God's grace and God's mercy, and give some kind of an olive branch for God's grace to work? Because if you cut them out, they will say, I was cut out of our estate. And that was the last thing that they will say about their parents. And maybe that's the right thing, but I do encourage people to consider, is this an opportunity to provide some grace or some mercy? Maybe you don't give them the same amount. Maybe you don't give it to them in the same way, but maybe you want to extend some of God's grace at that moment. So I would encourage you to just think through that.
One more question here that we got that came in. Do you recommend adjusting the amount you give to children really based on their need?
This is another big challenge, because
Sure
some
is.
kids are wealthier than you are, and some kids, some of your children have been, teachers at a Christian school, for instance, and just had none of the same kind of ability to produce wealth. And so, do you give based on need, or do you say equal all the way across? And I'm sure if we canvass this crowd, we'd get a variety of opinions. I think probably the stronger opinion I hear more often is, we're just going to be fair. We're going to be across the board. But fair doesn't necessarily mean equal, and equal doesn't necessarily mean fair. And so I think that's one of those things. If you're going to give less to one of your children that's very wealthy, you'll probably want to have that conversation with them. I know one client that we worked with was working with his mom, and he basically told her, I already have a tax problem. I don't want any of your estate. My siblings have all been in ministry and they actually need the money. I don't. So either take me out, or if you are going to give me anything, just give my share to charity. So some children will be speaking into that. And I think that that's a good sacred conversation to have with those children.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, if you're going to do something different than equal.
Excellent. So Jim, kind of coming back to the family meeting conversation, and I see there's a couple more questions, but we'll take those right after we touch on these last couple points. Anything else in the conversation that we should include that we haven't kind of addressed on earlier?
Well, we have to make sure we get to the logistics, like who will carry out the plan, who's the executor, if you have to set up a trust, who's the trustee, who will be at your final days of life, who's your power of attorney for property, who's your healthcare advocate or power of attorney for healthcare. Where are the documents located? What will be the plans for the next few years as you age? And then what are your plans for a funeral? Where do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be embalmed? All those kinds of questions. And I encourage you to put that into a book. In fact, I want to give you an example of one of our clients. It's a great one. They have this book that says, I got hit by a truck. Every time they go on a trip, they put that out on this table and they've told their kids, this book will be on this table if we're gone. And all of the details we need are there. And so in fact, if you want to go to the table of contents, it's really fun to look at it. They start with a family letter. Now this family has chosen not to read that family letter. It's a letter written, an after death letter.
Okay.
But they've shown the family this book. They just haven't shown them the letter. Summary of accounts, account access information, all their insurance, attorney and accountant contacts, their healthcare directive, power of attorney documents, their community property agreement, and then their will. And the will is here, and who's the executor. And I like what he wrote, last will and testament. Here's the bad news. What is left will not be life-changing. The good news is it's not life-changing. So that's just what one family did. Another family has a family meeting and they provide those documents every time they have a meeting, basic documents, and then they tell them where those are. But that family, in that meeting, you need to make sure you've communicated that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And just for those that are still waiting for your questions, we're going to address those right after this next little bit. But Jim, any other final words that you have of advice about having a family meeting?
Yeah. You're going to put this off because it's awkward and difficult, and you might want to be avoiding conflict. But your family will have this meeting. It'll either be set up by you while you're alive or after you're gone. If you set it up while you're alive, this family meeting might be difficult, might be a little bit stressful, but you'll be able to manage the expectations prior to and after the meeting, and you'll be able to, if you realize our plan is not the right plan, you have an opportunity to change it. But if that meeting happens after you're gone, it invites the kind of chaos that have caused families to not talk for days, weeks, months, years, or even decades. And some of you know this because that's happened in your family. You had one of those conflicts after the death of the surviving spouse, and you either have or people who have not spoken to a family member for decades as a result. We don't want that to happen in your family. And so I really encourage you to have this conversation now. In fact, one woman said to me last week, she said, I considered this letter I'm writing to my children and the meeting we're having, not as a gift to them, even though it is a gift to them. She said, I consider it a gift to myself, because when I do this, I put myself in a position of peace. And I know that the reason why a lot of people decided to attend this is a tough issue for you. And I want to encourage you, give the gift to yourself and your children of putting this together and meeting with your kids and communicating with them about it.
I love how you phrase that as this is a gift. This
Yeah.
really is a gift that you're giving to your children and your family. Scott asks a really interesting question here, where the roles are reversed, where the kids know they need to know, and the parents won't have the meeting. How do you encourage the kids to try to encourage the parents to get to that point, to have this meeting and share these details?
Yeah. So this is a whole nother topic.
Right.
We might want to do someday, but when parents are reluctant to talk about this, You can't force the parent to do it, but you can ask some leading questions that will help them recognize what they might want to do. You could say things like, hey, how do you want us to handle your affairs after you're gone? How would you like this to be handled? How would you like your plans to be communicated? How would you like to avoid strife in our family? Because we don't want to have strife. And so if you ask some questions that help them do some planning, do you think that your plan will provide any surprises for any of the kids? Because that can be problematic. And if you ask a question like, are all your affairs in order? It's an easy yes. But if you ask questions that are going to get them thinking and you give them the opportunity to describe for you what they want to have happen, then that might open up the opportunity. Now, my parents didn't have a family meeting. They talked with several of us, but I had extensive conversations with my dad. And when we were talking, he said, "This is what I'm thinking and why, and I'd like you to communicate this to the family." And so when my parents both passed, we had the family meeting. They weren't there, but I had direct statements from Dad that I was able to communicate, and this is why. And I would have liked to have seen that happen before.
Yeah.
But we were able to do it after because we'd had the conversation with Dad. So I do, if your parents are reluctant, I do encourage you to be in communication with them.
And the last question, Marion, thank you so much for your comment. Jim is an expert. This has been his life work, and we are thrilled to have him here at Barnabas as our executive director and our leader. But you can tell over the years, he has met with thousands and thousands of families and done this many, many times. And so if you have further questions regarding your question on annuities, annuities have their place. Marion asked a question about charitable gift annuities. Do we like them? How many? That's really dependent on, it's a tool. It really is a tool in estate planning. It may make sense for some, it doesn't make sense for others. And so Marion, if you have specific questions on that, we're happy to connect with you, and I'll touch on how you can connect with us as well.
Yeah, I think all of those are tools that can help you accomplish your goals. The most important thing is, what are your goals and how do you do that in the way that is going to be best for your family, best for your ministries? And in most cases, people like it to be the least amount going for taxes.
Sure.
And so if you don't want to pay extra taxes, we have ways that you can streamline your plan to eliminate tax and still accomplish what you want to for your family and your charitable interests.
Well, thank you all for sticking with us for this amount of time. We normally try to keep these around 20 minutes. We've gone a little longer than that, but it's been a great topic with great questions. There are some additional resources for you. If you'd like to have a resource on this topic about sharing your estate plan with your family, feel free to reach out to us at info@barnabasfoundation.com. Actually, we still use .com in that, but we have changed to .org. I realize in our script as well here, but or you can call us at 888-448-3040 and feel free to chat with any of our member of our team. If you have further questions about today's topic, we would encourage you to reach out to the ministry representative who invited you to today's broadcast, because we have many of you on today that were invited by member ministries, and or you can contact us directly. We're happy to engage with you on that as well. Our next event in this format will be on May 15th, where we're going to talk about gifts that pay income for a lifetime. And Adam Lopez, one of your colleagues and an attorney here at Barnabas Foundation, will join me for that topic. And as a reminder, today's broadcast is recorded and it'll be posted up on our website at barnabasfoundation.org/interactive by Monday is when we should be done. And I see one last question. I'll just see if I can read this real quick. And well, where's the content to designate me as so this is a friend and a former coworker that wanted to designate this individual as their sole beneficiary and has expressed that there's no one else they want to give their money to. I don't feel comfortable because I've negatively experienced the impact of money once introduced into a friendship. People advise me that by accepting this gift, that this will help them with their end of life peace, which I want. My friend is avoiding to have the conversation about this. Any advice?
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, people get to do what they want to do with their money,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't force them to give or not give. But I think you're wise to be very cautious, to make sure they go in with their eyes wide open, and that you encourage them to get independent counsel on this and stay as far away from that transaction and anyone who's doing that transaction as possible, so that there's no question about undue influence or inappropriate relationship. If the money comes to you, it comes to you, and then you can decide what to do with it.
Right.
But then the other side, I guess, is you just have to really work hard to make sure that doesn't affect your relationship.
Very good. And you're welcome to give us a call and contact us, and we're more than happy to dive into that particular question.
Sure.
Or any questions any of you might have had. We are here to be a resource for you. As a supporter of our member ministries around the country, you have access to our team of experts like Jim and others to talk about these and other conversations or aspects of your estate plan. And it's all here as a courtesy to you by the support of these member ministries around the country that support the work that we do. So we invite you to reach out to us at any time. Thank you for joining us and sticking with us. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye.
Bye.